What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Guardians of the Future. I'm Justin Latta, your host. Thank you for being patient as I continue to have an inconsistent schedule with this podcast. No guest today. It is just me and me solo, but I appreciate you tuning in all the same. It's been a little bit since we've had an episode, and the last time we talked was before a bunch of promotions. So Tugboat had not been to Lake County yet. Obviously, Furman and Kayfus were still in Lake County, and Angel Hanau was still in Lynchburg. So we have a lot to catch up on in terms of promotions, just general goings-on in the system. I also owe you guys an interview, two interviews actually, one with Nate Furman before he got promoted, and CJ Kayfus as well, because I wanted to ask CJ Kayfus why he was doing so well and how he was feeling about the outfield. Now, since he's in Akron, he's not really playing as much outfield, but we'll touch on all those things that have happened since then. So let's just get right into it. Promotions have been kind of the big story so far, right? So the first one we've been waiting for weeks, the whole year, essentially, is Tugboat. So Tugboat finally got his promotion to Lake County, and he has not disappointed so far. It's been a good run for Tugboat. He has pretty much kept up, everything that he did at Lynchburg so far. So he's continue to strike guys out. He doesn't walk guys. He's given a few more home runs, and I think that is just mostly due because he is around the plate. I think there's some Josh Tomlin, Adam Plutko, maybe Aaron Savali to the profile. Maybe more Aaron Savali and some Josh Tomlin. Josh Tomlin had a good curveball, and I think Tugboat does too, as well as a slider, and just overall good fastball command. I mean, he's striking out 25 and 15 innings so far. He struck out 71 and 40 at Lynchburg. So the strikeouts are down a little bit. But that's not really a surprise considering he jumped a level. And, Tugboat is 90 to 92, more like 80. I've seen some 87s. So it's like 87 to 90. There's not a lot of hit in the fastball. I will say what does make his fastball work. So when he's throwing 88, 90, it probably comes in to the hitter like 2 or 3 miles, maybe 2 miles an hour over what it is, maybe 3, because there's just so much deception in his delivery. Obviously, he commands it well, and that helps. When you can command a pitch that has deception and put it anywhere you want in the zone, that really helps, or around the black even. So the fastball is able to play up because of where he's able to spot it, and because he's able to do it deceptively with his delivery, and his arm slot just makes it very difficult to pick up. And then he also has 2 other pitches that he can throw for strikes too. And for the same thing that happened at Lynchburg, guys at that level just are not prepared to see a pitcher who can throw 3 pitches generally in the strike zone and almost anywhere he wants them most times. I don't know if Wilkinson has like Bieber level command. It's probably more like Savali or Josh Tomlin, where it's, like Bieber coming through the minors had like 70 grade command. He legitimately could put the ball wherever he wanted, and we've seen that over the years. I would say Tugboat's probably 55 command, 50 command. It's pretty close. We'll see. Command and control are different for those who aren't really sure. Command and control are different things. So command is the ability to put the ball wherever you want. If the catcher calls it low and away to a right-handed hitter, you can hit the lower quadrant of the strike zone away. Control is just throwing the strikes and not walking guys, which Tugboat definitely has above average control. He doesn't walk guys. And the general rule of thumb is as a standard deviation below. So on a grading scale of 20 to 80 on the scouting scale, where 80 is obviously like the best you can do in anything, and 20 is barely a professional player. Although that's a scale only for professional players. I mean, I would probably have negative 20 anything when it comes to playing any kind of baseball, rec league or major league or minor league or even indie ball. But so on the 20 to 80 scale, I would say Wilkinson, Tugboat, he's got 50 grade, 55 control, which means he doesn't walk guys, and then 50 command. The deviation is a grade below, so 50 command, which means he's average about spotting his stuff. And both those deviations could be a little better. So I could even see it being 60 control, 55 command. And he's going to need that with his fastball, truthfully. And again, he does have 2 other good pitches, I think, that really work. But it is a command and control profile with a couple of average pitches. We'll see how it goes as he goes on. I mean, high A has not been really too much of a test for him. It's been pretty good, other than some extra home runs, but not unexpected. And here's the other one. CJ Kayfus was just off to a fantastic start in Lake County. And the really big reason for that was the ability to get the ball in the air. For the most part, was hitting a ton of fly balls. And for a guy that is probably got maybe average power, maybe even 45 power, I could see someone saying he's got 45 power. And for a first baseman only, he could play a little bit of outfield, which we'll talk about in the interview with him later in this episode. He needs to be able to have the power, obviously, as a corner guy. But he gets the ball in the air a lot. He doesn't strike out. He takes his walks. The strikeout and the walk numbers, at least at that level, look very real. They've both gone up a little bit at AA, but that's probably just a blip here for 5 games through recording this. But he gets the ball in the air a decent amount. I mean, he was a little bit of a heavier ground ball hitter in Lake County, but when he gets the ball in the air, he's very good about finding the gap. He's very good about hitting the ball to the pull side, and that's what helps him take advantage of whatever pop he has. I would say, average power, 50 grade power for game power is about 20 to 25 homers a year. So I could see Kayfus being a 20 home run guy and maybe a little bit more, but it really depends on what he does against lefties, how he recognizes breaking balls, which he's starting to get better at. That was something that was an issue for him in Lake County, as we talked about with Mike Mahoney a few weeks ago. And what he's going to do against upper level pitching. That's all going to depend. But I do think that obviously the promotion was well deserved. I'm very glad Cleveland got him to AA after just 40 games in high A this year. And then they went out and cleared space. I mean, I'll give Joe Naranjo his due. I've talked about Joe Naranjo on this podcast a couple years ago, and I thought it was a hit over power profile, and then he started to grow in a little bit of power in Lake County, but he kind of sacrificed the hit. Guy was an amazing defender at first base. I mean, very, very sure-handed, had range, just a very instinctual player at first base. But unfortunately, as a third-round pick, as a high schooler who, again, was hit over power, a good defensive profile and being nice just doesn't really cut it in the minor leagues. So Cleveland had to move on from him in order to make space for CJ Kayfus at Akron. And I thought, well, they could have just played CJ in the outfield and kept Naranjo because Chase DeLauter is back on the IL with turf toe now, which I didn't really plan to get into, but we might as well. He hasn't played since May 28th. He was coming off of re-aggravating that foot that he had surgically repaired, came back, and then kind of ran into a wall making a catch, and then that aggravated his other toe. So he had left foot surgery in college, and then he had left foot surgery on it after being drafted. And that delayed his 2023 debut. And then he re-aggravated that left foot injury earlier this year, and then he was out for a while, came back May 28th, and then sustained right turf toe on his right foot. So it's a different foot, but it's a foot injury nonetheless. And he's on a 7-day IL, so not great for DeLauter. So Cleveland maybe could have hung on to Joe Naranjo and just played Kayfus in the outfield because clearly DeLauter is going to be out for a little bit longer now, and that's another issue for another day. I don't think there's a trade out there for Cleveland this year in season for a hitter that's a long-term fit in the outfield that you can trade DeLauter for. But if there was a hypothetical trade where you're acquiring an outfielder that you have like a year and a half to 2 years of control of, I would consider trading him if it's an outfielder. The Astros aren't doing this, but if they were to trade Kyle Tucker, he's got a year and a half of control left. I would move DeLauter in a trade for like Kyle Tucker. Just, feet are weird, and just those injuries continue to pile up, and I would just get nervous about hanging on to that. Anyway, so CJ Kayfus, obviously. Nate Furman, the other one, really good. He went up to Akron as well, added some power this year. We've talked about him on the show previously. For Furman, it's probably more 40 grade power. It's, he had 7 home runs in Lake County this year after having none the previous year in over 400 plate appearances. I would say before, though, it was legitimately 20 grade power, which you're getting like 5 home runs out of a year. And power is never going to be his game. Let's be honest here. That's why he is similar to Stephen Kwan, is that Kwan started with 20 grade power, which is, like I said, 5 single digit home runs. I don't even know if you get to 9 with that power. But now Furman, I think, is probably at 40 grade power, which is fringe. And that's, maybe in the 10 range. I mean, he might have 10 home run power now. And that's important because power is never going to be his game, but you got to be able to hit some home runs at the major league level if you're going to be any sort of regular player. Even if you're going to be I don't know about part-timer, but if you're going to be any sort of regular player, whether it's even a platoon guy or just someone who plays a couple days a week, you've got to be able to have the ability to hit the ball to the ballpark occasionally with 10 home run power. So I think Furman has that now. We'll see what the rest of it looks like when he gets there. I always like the hit tool, and he's a guy who needs to get the ball in the air a little bit more. He's a ground ball hitter. He's pulling the ball more this year, so he's getting into that. And when I was talking to Stephen Kwan, when we were all talking to him when he was rehabbing at Lake County, they were talking to him about Furman, and he was saying, I think he recognized the similarities there, and there was a little push for Furman to kind of take the Stephen Kwan approach where he could be advantageous with his swings in certain counts, being up in the count, looking for a pitch in the inner half of the plate and maybe a fastball, and he could look to take a big swing and look to pull it in the air. Not something you're going to do down 0-2 or 1-1, maybe, I don't know, but the right count, the right situation. If you kind of feel where you're at in the at bat for that, and that's something that comes with time. So I think that's more what he is. It's a 10 home run power, but I think the Kwan thing, it makes sense for him. I mean, this is about the same age. Kwan's breakout came at AA after the COVID year in 2020. Furman is the same age, and he's just getting AA now. So we'll see what happens to AA. He is walking a ton, which is great. He's not swinging and missing. He's taking a lot of pitches. He's got a 1% swinging strike rate, which to me says a lot of passivity, but that's kind of who Furman is. That's how he was last year when he got to Lake County, and he had to do something in the offseason to do it, to address it, and he did. So I expect he'll make the same adjustment at AA, but it might take some time for him. And then Angel Hanau, what a great season it's been for him so far. He's now at Lake County. He's looked pretty good so far. Looks physically much bigger than he did a couple of years ago. I mean, he spent, like I said, I've said this before on the podcast, he spent part of 3 years at Lynchburg. He only had 8 games in 2022, but he played 72 in 2023. He played 44 this year, I should say. So he was ready to move on, but he physically looked more mature, and it showed in his swings. It showed in his pop. He was managing the strike zone very well. The numbers all looked very good there in terms of strikeouts and swinging strike rates, but strikeout and walk rates, I think if you're a listener to this podcast or Locked On Guardians, you know that those things are unreliable, especially at single A. AA and AAA, they're still unreliable, but they're closer to what they're going to look like. So I disregard all stats below AA. Truthfully, it's more about just showing traits and showing some ability there. And Hanau has shown that. He stole 12 bases there, which is good. He got caught. He got caught 3 times, so good success rate. So far, he's shown some pop in Lake County. There's a lot of swings there, and Hanau is a guy who likes to swing. He does not get cheated up there. I kind of worry about that against higher grade breaking stuff. So we'll see what he does there. I think once scouting reports get around on him in Lake County, we'll see what it looks like in terms of if they're exposing him for those swings. But I also think those swings tend to be in fastball counts. I think he takes those swings. It just seems like that's a whole organizational approach at this point. Is everybody is looking at that philosophy to, okay, I make good contact and I'm going to pick a count and a pitch, and I'm going to take a heavy swing and see if I can come up with some damage here, and then readjust on a 2-strike approach, which again goes back to the first time. I'm sure this has been said for generations, not new. The first time I remember hearing about it was the Orlando Cabrera thing with Asdrubal Cabrera. The year he went from being a guy who had like 7 to 9 home runs to being a guy who had 25, and it had to do with, you can take those chances and do it, and it worked for him. And that just seems to be kind of I don't want to say general approach to the whole system, but it seems like a philosophy they're trying to teach a few guys, and it's really working. So those are the promoted guys so far. Obviously, there needs to be more. The system does have. I will say I'm much more pleased with how things are working out in the system this year than I thought coming in. Coming into the year, this system really had some warts that I was concerned about. I mean, pitching is still not great. Joey Cantillo is your top pitching prospect right now, and he is just coming back from a hamstring issue, and we'll talk about him later in this podcast. But like I was way too high on Will Dion. He struggled. Ryan Webb has struggled. Doug Nikhazy has been a little better, but I barely had him on my list anyway. I didn't write up Mace. I'm very impressed with Austin Peterson breaking out this year. I think I wrote Peterson, if I'm not mistaken. You know what? I did not have Peterson on my list this year. You know why I didn't have Peterson on my top 50? Because he didn't miss a whole lot of bats at low A last year. I didn't think he was going to be a guy who missed bats to the next level, but he looks improved this year. So I think when I update my midseason list, Peterson's going to be a guy who flies up there. Ross Carver, I thought was going to be my breakout guy. He's not even in the rotation right now. It's kind of a mess. You've got Jack Leftwich, who's a reliever right now. Messick is your number 2 pitching prospect probably now. And then you got a bunch of relievers. You have Clemmy, who has control issues. Like, pitching is definitely still a concern. That's not even to talk about, guys like Campbell and Espino and Zibin, who have all yet to pitch in a couple of years or at all in the pros. That's concerning. But Manzardo has been good. Frito had a rough April. He's turned it around. Ralphie has looked fantastic. We'll talk about him. Obviously Andrew Walters is pretty solid. Parker Messick's been good. A couple of these hitters just have been really good. Mooney's been good. Kayfus, Furman, Cooper Ingle, Cade Smith graduated off my list, so that's great. Like, some guys have really broken out. So I'm much more pleased with the system right now than I coming into the year where I had a lot of concerns. So Jason Churio, probably the next guy it needs to be at Lake County. The question though for him though is how they're going to open up at bats, because outfield there is a little trickier. You'd have to cut or promote somebody. I mean, they just put Isaiah Green back on the developmental list. I would expect he's going to be a guy who's going to be let go after the draft when they have to add new guys to the organization, because they keep moving him back and forth. But there's no one to go up. Like, Guy Lipscomb can go to Akron, but you've got Petey Halpin and Planez is playing out there. You've got you've got Watson playing some outfield. Kayfus will probably move in the outfield, although, Bracho plays first. I would say probably after the draft, you can get a couple of those guys out. Like, Connor Cox might go back to the developmental list. I mean, he's around now. Maybe they'll hang on to him. You could move on from Aaron Bracho, who looks like he's just not a prospect anymore. So even just one of those guys, you could move up, Guy Lipscomb from Lake County to Akron and get him time up there. Or you can move up Jake Fox, even, who's been down there for a year and a half now, although Fox has struggled a bit this year. So I'm not really sure what to do with him, what the deal is there. Angel Zarate barely plays. He's like a 5th outfielder in high A, so I'm not really sure what you do there. But you can move him up on the bench if you need to. And Boyd looks like he's not. I mean, they're going to hang on to Boyd because they just got him last year, and he's been hurt on and off the last 2 years. But it's going to take some time to clear up some space for Churio in Lake County. He only had 42 plate appearances last year. But here's the thing. I think he's definitely ready for high A. And here's why. He's walking more than he strikes out. He's not swinging and missing. He's running like crazy, too. He's got 17 steals and 22 tries. Those are all signs that, again, stats don't necessarily mean anything or translate all the time, but those are signs that he is starting to be unchallenged by the pitching there, which is not a surprise. I mean, when you walk that much and you don't strike out, and all those things, you're not swinging and missing. Like, that just shows you're not being challenged there, because again, the pitching at that level just isn't really all that high quality. So I definitely think he's ready for a new challenge. The only wart right now that you can say about Jason Chourio is that he hits a lot of ground balls. It's over 50% of the time on the ground. And I don't think Chourio is ever going to be a power hitter either. I mean, I think not a guy you expect to hit more than 20 home runs, but um, he's got to get the ball in the air to even do that, and that's not something he currently does. So that's really the only blip on his kind of radar right now that he's got to take care of. But everything else looks good, and again, he needs that challenge. Um, it's just going to take some time. And then the Ralphie Velasquez, I think Ralphie's starting to go through the same things at Lynchburg too. He had kind of a slow week last week hitting, but he's walking, and now he is getting to the point where he's walking a lot more. Um, I feel like he's not being challenged as much either. He could probably use more time in high A or low A than Chourio. But also getting at bats for him in Lake County might be difficult too. They have first base at bats now. It's the Kayfus is gone. Maya Collado is not really your traditional first baseman. He's someone who probably should play another position, but he plays there because they need someone there. You can create a bats for Ralphie. I think the issue for Lynchburg is having a first baseman to play there, and they should just consider, for the better of development for Ralphie, is put Juan Benjamin over there and just let him play first, and then add a catcher and let one of the catchers play first if they don't have a first baseman in the ACL, which they really don't. But they've got plenty of catchers who can go to Lynchburg and be the backup, and then let one of the first basemen moonlight at first base. So, but again, I think those moves come after the draft. I think both those guys stay in Lynchburg until after the draft, and then you could see some movement there because they're gonna have to move on from guys anyway. So once they get there, they'll have room for them. And then just some pitchers that I think probably are coming along in terms of development. I mean, again, we know that I think it won't be long before Jacob Bresnahan, who was the 13th round pick a year ago, I think got, last I checked, 20 something strikeouts compared to 3 walks in 19 innings. He's been fantastic in the ACL. I think if they build his pitch count up, he'll be ready for Lynchburg, in which case you can promote. I think the first guy to be promoted from Lynchburg, I know a lot of people are going to want to be Alex Clemmy. I don't think it's going to be Clemmy. I think it's Yorman Gomez who's ready to fill some innings in Lake County at first, just because he's been there before, and I think he's just ready. He's been solid. And Denholm, Messick, and Peterson all need AA reps. After the draft, it's going to be the draft. I don't think is going to impact pitching as much because Cleveland's very, very strict about how they handle pitching after the draft. If guys had a very long season in college, they won't ramp them back up. They're not going to add to the workload. They're careful about how some guys have been off for a decent amount of time. They don't want to ramp them back up after having a long break. They will to a certain extent, but they're careful about where those guys are when they come in terms of innings pitched, whether it was a lot or it's just been a long layoff. So that's going to be a trickier thing to handle. Hopefully there are some, though. The thing that could be good about this is, look, the ACL season ends a little sooner. I think it ends right after the draft because nobody wants to play in 110 degrees in Arizona. It's already bad enough that their games at 6 p.m. Mountain Time are 100 degrees anyway. They could promote some arms from there, though, after the ACL season ends, and then that could help push some guys up the ladder, like a Gomez and a Jackson Humphreys or an Alonzo Richardson who's spent some time at Lynchburg already. And then that can allow you to push your Denholms, your Messicks, your Petersons up. And then you can move on from a guy like Jaime Arias. And you can bump, I guess they want to bump Carver back to a bullpen role. And you can bump, Nikhazy or Mace or Davenport to Columbus. And then you're not relying on Connor Gillespie's and Darren McKagan's and John Dogaxis is already back on the developmental list. Like, you can create spots for those guys up there, but it might take until July or August to do that, which which kind of stinks. But these guys need innings where they are, and the reason this is all slower is because of the 165-man roster. I know everybody wants to. I think you have to make certain exceptions for certain players to challenge them. Like Cleveland's philosophy has always been very, very conservative with any promotions, truthfully, in the minors. And you have to go where there are plate appearances. And unfortunately, you have to have certain guys available at certain rosters to make sure that you're not overtaxing other players and you have injury coverage and things like that. But the 165-man roster has really made this tough. You have to, you're still filling out 1, 2, 3, 4 full season affiliates. You're still filling out a Arizona League roster, which needs a lot of players because it's Arizona League. You've got dudes that aren't going to play every day because they're just starting their careers. You got pitchers that are, you don't want to tax their arms because they're just starting out. So the 165 list and domestically is hurting promotions right now because you don't have the ability to backfill like you used to. You can't just go and sign a guy off the street like just dip into like the Lake Erie Crushers and be like, all right, we'll sign this guy and put him in Lake County so we can move Parker Messick to Double-A. Like you don't have that ability anymore because you're hanging on to a bunch of guys from the draft you're trying to get something out of, and you got to add more from the draft. The 165 for Cleveland right now is at 161, and you've got 10 guys on the injured list who don't count. So it's at 171, really. And then you've got the guys on the full season exemption list who also don't count. So, you're not going to need to count Espino and Campbell this year, but and again, this is also why the promotions are an issue too. Like everyone wants to see Messick and Peterson at the next level and Denholm. If you had Dylan DeLucia, if you had Justin Campbell, if you had Reed Johnston, there's and Jacob Zibin and Gio Rivera, who they've been waiting on for a couple of years. If you had all those guys healthy, they could be eating those innings at Lake County, and you could be pushing guys up, and you don't need as many. So injuries and the 165 player limit in the minors, you don't have the ability to backfill, and it's really hard to backfill from Arizona because when you move guys from Arizona, you're not bringing guys over in the middle of the year from the DSL because there's visas and there's just a whole bunch of other stuff in the way there. Cleveland typically has not brought a lot of DSL guys over anyway. And once you bring the DSL guys over, they start to count towards the domestic 165. DSL guys currently don't count towards that. So when you bring them over, they count towards that. So that doesn't really help your case either. So it's very hard to backfill anymore, which is why this is such a challenge promoting guys. But everybody has to deal with this. You just got to be creative in the ways you are spreading things out. But again, I think Cleveland having injury issues, that's been part of it as well. Joey Cantillo has been back since we've last talked to, which is good. I watched him pitch tonight before I recorded this. He got 3 innings, 40 pitches. He got 11 whiffs, 5 on the changeup. He was 92, 94, looked really good. Control probably is always going to be an issue with him for the most part. He's probably never going to be a guy that has above average control. Maybe it's going to be fringe average at best. But the stuff is good. If he can just corral the walks a little bit, the stuff is going to help them. I think he looks good. I know they've done some work with him to quiet down his arm swing a little bit or just the delivery. He's going from the stretch more. So we'll see. And then John Kenzie Noel, I know he's off. He's doing really well in Columbus. Strikeouts and walks. Strikeouts were never an issue for Noel. He never struck out a ton in the first place. Not a big deal. The walks were never great. Like it's always a very aggressive approach. Again, this is the Oscar Gonzalez issue. The real issue for Noel in the past was always the consistency of finding the barrel. Like he would go 2 or 3 games where he would just crush the ball, hit everything 110 miles an hour, and then he'd have games where he was hitting weak ground balls at second base or pulling on the shortstop because he just wasn't consistent at finding the barrel. And that's why he had for a guy who had just mammoth power, would have very average exit velocities, which is still the case. His average exit velocity is 877, but it's not always indicative of who is good as a hitter. But you would like that barrier or that bar to be a little bit higher because he does have that great raw power. So he should be hitting the ball hard more consistently, and he doesn't. And that's always been the issue for Noel. He's never going to be a guy that walks a lot. He's hitting the ball a little bit harder, more consistently at the moment since May. I think it's time to give him a shot. The problem is, and I think the bat has warranted a shot, but my problem is there's nowhere to put him in Cleveland. He is not an outfield. I've seen him play the outfield. He shouldn't be playing the outfield. Cleveland's put him out there, and I think it's very telling that when Manzardo went to the majors, he became the everyday first baseman. He was not a guy that was really getting a ton of reps in the outfield. That is very telling to me. If they thought he was an outfielder, I think they would have reserved time for him in the outfield. They put him at first because you had Mike Caprice if you wanted to continue to develop Noel as an outfielder. You do need to get a look at him because he's out of options at the end of this year. And it really stinks to go into spring training next year and evaluate him and George Valera both, trying to figure out whether or not they're both part of your roster or not. I would expect one to get traded. I thought Valera would get traded at the end of last offseason, and he didn't. But that's also because the value was probably low, and there's no reason to trade him at that point. I don't know what the trade value of these guys is right now, but Noel's a right first baseman. He's got to be a 30 home run hitter to be a regular, and I don't think he is that. But that doesn't mean he shouldn't get a look. It's just I don't know how you create a look for him. Like, I guess you can play him in the outfield if you really wanted, but it's not ideal. There's no path for him at first base. We'll see what happens this offseason with Josh Naylor. And like I said, I think one of Valera or Noel gets traded. The thing is, I don't think Noel has a lot of trade value. Valera had some because he's been a top prospect. He's left-handed. He plays the outfield. Noel is right-handed. He plays first base. I don't think anybody thinks he's an outfielder, so there's no trade value there. But I don't know what Valera would necessarily net you at this point either. I think it's better to get a look at him now and see. And maybe they use him at the trading deadline. I don't know. But Valera is going to need the shot first just because there might be room for him. I'd hate to move on from Noel without seeing. I think he deserves that look, but at the same time, it's very hard to create that look. I'm running low on time to record here today. I want to talk about the draft a little bit. I'll say this. I saw on his Instagram story Chase Burns at the Guardians-Reds game on Tuesday night. I think he was there for the Reds, where he was sitting. Basically, he was sitting first base side. I would assume he was there for the Reds, maybe as an interview or something for the game. I don't know. I'm at the point, though, for me, at 1-1, I'll be disappointed if anybody isn't taken besides Travis Bazzana. I think Travis Bazzana, not to say Charlie Condon's not a good prospect, but Travis Bazzana, I think, has all of the qualities and the traits that you want. I know there's not a lot of future projection there, but there's probably not a lot for Condon either. He kind of is who he is already, those two guys, and that's why they're the top two prospects, because they already kind of are developed to where they're going to be in the majors. I just prefer Bazzana being up the middle and having less chase, having the Cape data piece to it, and just knowing the personality in terms of work ethic and the things he's done already to improve himself. Plus, there's some speed there too. I think overall, it just makes sense. I think if they take Condon, then it's not a bad pick. I'm just saying I think I'd be more disappointed if it's not Bazzana. I'm almost at the point where my number 2 might be Chase Burns. I don't think I would be happy with. I would definitely be unhappy with Connor Griffin. Nothing against Connor Griffin, but with who's available in this draft and Cleveland's past with first-round high schoolers, it just doesn't make sense to me to cut that deal with him. I don't think you need to save that much money for this draft. Like, they definitely want to save money, but there's only so much you need to save for this draft. It's not like you're not buying Slade Caldwell, you're not buying William Schmidt, you're not buying Cam Newton to 36. Those guys are going in the top 30. You're not buying those dudes down, no matter how much you save. And if you're saving all that money on drafting a high schooler at 1-1 anyway, it's even riskier to go at 36 there. You've got to find a really good balance there. So I don't see that. JJ Weatherhold, I know is in there, but Cleveland, I'd be very disappointed in that because Cleveland has taken injury risks before. Espino was off a lot of boards because they were worried about the delivery and the injuries, and he got hurt. People worried about Gavin Williams. That hasn't hurt them yet, although he's working his way back. from an injury, so that's scary. Chase DeLauter, it's been a mess with his feet. Just a lot of those guys were off the boards of some teams because of injuries. And Cleveland took a risk. Brady Aiken, too. Cleveland took a risk because they felt where they were picking in the draft, they weren't going to get access to that kind of talent. And I don't disagree with it necessarily, because if it works out, you're getting a talent that's way above 20, that's way above 15, picking that low. But when you're picking 1-1, you don't got to play those games. Pick the guy that's going to be a good player and eliminate as much risk as you can, because you normally don't pick that high. Get it right. So I'm Travis Bazana is like here for me, way up here. And then I think there's a gap for me before Burns, and then it's Condon. And then that's about it. I would consider for the top three. I don't think there's anybody else I would consider. Not Hagen Smith. As much as I love Nick Kurtz, I think I'm out there at 1-1. Definitely out on Jack at 1-1. I think it's Bazana is 1A is 1. Condon is probably like even there'd be a bit of a gap, and then he's 3, and then I would say Condon would be 4. I just skipped 2 altogether. So there's that. All right, I got some interviews I want to play for you guys. I want to. I talked to I can't think of his name. Nate Furman before he got promoted during Stephen Kwan's rehab. I'll play that for you. What has gotten into him in terms of power, the approach he's been taking, what he's been doing differently. I talked about how he would have liked to have been there for Travis and Jason Kelsey at the softball game, although I don't think Jason was there. And then I talked to CJ Kayfus about what was going well for him before he got promoted and how he feels about the outfield, which he also played in high school and college, so he's not that unfamiliar with it. And also talked about his time in the Cape Cod League and how that prepared him as well. So I'm going to play those all for you now, and we'll get out of here on that note. So thanks for listening this week. Thanks for accommodating my inconsistent schedule. Unfortunately, just a lot going on in the month of June, and just life and doing other content as well. We're at Lockdown Guardians. But after Father's Day, Willie Hood's going to be on with me. We're going to talk draft specifically. At that point, we'll maybe take some questions, but we're going to talk a ton of draft at the end of this month. So stick around for that as well. So here are those interviews. Hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks for listening. I gotta ask, you're a power hitter now. What's going on, man?
Man, it's been good. We got a really good group of guys. Just taking it one day at a time and trying to work hard. So it's been fun.
What's new with the swing? I mean, no home runs last year. Now you got 7. We're calling it the Furminator. Is that the nickname? Do you got something else?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, guys just call me Firm. Guys in the locker room have been messing around with the whole Barry Bonds thing. So that's been funny. But yeah, just kind of like a lot of work in the offseason, just kind of swing overhaul. So it's been fun to kind of work through that. Still working hard. Day by day, just trying to take it with it.
So you got the leg kick. That looks like it's new and just more intent and trying to get the bat a little more. Is it like more vertical? Is that what it is?
Nothing so much like bat path, but just clean movements in the lower half. Like the leg kick has been an addition. I've never had a leg kick before, so it's been fun to work with that and just like work through it. Like ups and downs with it, but all season definitely a ton of work. Like hours in the cage, just trying to make sure it's in a good spot, and good to see some results, but still working hard and trying to perfect it.
Now I know like you're not chasing home runs. Obviously, no, it's not your game, and you're hitting some. Have you had to catch yourself a little bit, seeing the results? You're hitting the ball with the fence, you're hitting it hard. Do you have to be careful to like make sure you're not chasing home runs, or is it easy just to be like, I know who I am as a hitter, and I'm not going out there looking for home runs?
Yeah, I think it's kind of like a double-edged sword. Like trying to impact the ball better is a big focus this year. So really just making sure the swing is in a good spot. Like I know who I am as a hitter, so I think that helps. Kind of just not getting too big, just kind of understanding like what I can do with certain pitches and trying to stay in the strike zone for sure, like not expand. So
you got off to a good start last year, and up here you kind of hit some rough patches, and you're doing great now. What have you learned in the last year about yourself and baseball? Obviously, hitters, you fail 7 times out of 10, you're doing pretty good. But what have you learned about yourself, and just maybe the difference between what you saw last year from pitchers and this year and yourself?
Yeah, I think just consistency, like not trying to look too much at the bigger picture, like taking it day by day, like the work in the cage that we do before the game, the work on the field, just trusting that preparation when I get in the box and get out on the field. Just trying to. I think last year it got easier to look at the bigger picture a little bit. Wasn't really familiar with pro ball a lot, so this year I have a better understanding. Just trying to take it day by day.
I know because you're an Eagles fan. You probably listen to New Heights, right?
Yeah.
So they mentioned the captains on there, and I know the captains are out there floating and trying to get one of them here. If we get Jason Kelsey here, you making the pitch to catch the first pitch?
Yeah, I think I'd have to. I mean, the Birds, my family, we have season tickets, so Jason was just unbelievable for the Eagles, and that would be really cool.
He said, I'm not chasing home runs. I'm not trying to hit the ball, 500 feet, but staying true to my approach again, looking for my pitch that plays into my swing. And I guess that's why you see the power numbers jump. I think the biggest difference from even here to college is more of like a mix from the pitchers. They're going, 4 different pitches rather than fastball changeup or fastball slider. The experience of playing every single day and getting your body used to it and seeing how it does take a toll on your body. I think that's how it. All of high school I was mainly more of an outfielder, I'd say. So, and then I went to Miami, played a little bit of right my freshman year, but then the last 2 years was all first base. So just getting my feet back out there and starting to feel more comfortable.